And here I am, 2 years after my depressive affair, a year and a half after the divorce, 1 year of therapy, 22 words to describe my story, and I think I have writer's block. I told Dr. Thompson that I was not a natural writer, but he insisted. His idea, minus any psychiatric nonsense, is that by telling the story of my life, I can find a way to move forward. It's like my life is a fairy tale. It's like I'm just a character. As if by writing about the worst mistake I've ever made, I could write myself a happy ending. I think this is bullshit. But Thompson is the one with the PhD and a 4.8 rating on Google reviews, and I'm the one who hired him, so I guess I should give him everything I've got there is. At the same time, no one in the world would see this, including the good doctor. It's one thing to admit your ugliness and cruelty towards yourself, usually at 1 in the morning, with a glass of white wine in your hand and 3 more in your stomach. But quite another to reopen this wound in a beige room with Mondrian prints on the wall and a guy who looks like at William H. Macy sitting across from you. This is not about the proudest moments of my life. It's about dark days, stupid decisions, and regrets. So many regrets. As for the happy ending, forget about it. Clarity will not change the past, nor will it change what my life is now. For some mistakes, there is no return. There is no return to square one. There is no opportunity to shout unreadable. There is only honesty, regret, and, I hope, understanding. At least that's what I pray for. Because I desperately want to understand why. So here's what happened to me. By the 3rd time with Winslow Hubble, I had gotten the sex routine down to a routine, and he was already at the door. Cleaning up after sex took more time than the betrayal itself, which was fine with me. After all, I loved cleaning and hated having sex with Winslow, so why not spend my time doing what I liked best? Priorities. Cleaning up after Winslow's visits was like meditation. Changing the sheets, spraying air freshener, taking a shower, applying hospital-grade disinfectant to virtually every surface he touched. The rhythm of these actions calmed me. This helped me regain my sense of balance. This became especially noticeable on the 6th day, the last one when we had sex. That day started out just like the previous 5. I led Winslow into the bedroom. In the back of my mind, I hoped that I could get rid of him and start cleaning in less than 15 minutes. I chose Winslow for my revenge because he is easy to manipulate. As they say, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. And so I, staring at the ceiling, noticed that something had changed. Did Charlie really buy a new smoke detector? Have you ever looked at yourself and wondered, how did I end up here? I understand. It's a strange question. This thought flashed through my head as I threw Winslow to the floor and screamed for him to get out of my apartment. I think he was already wearing pants when I slammed the front door, but I'm not sure. I knew only one thing. If he stayed in the apartment for even a second, I would kill him. I spent the next few hours cleaning my bedroom, covering my mouth, changing the sheets, covering my mouth some more, and taking long, hot showers with antibacterial body wash while covering my mouth. Cleaning and gagging didn't give me much time to explore the existential crisis Winslow caused, but I've had a lot of time to think about it since then, and then a lot of time in therapy to process all of those musings. 2 years later, I'm starting to understand what it's all about. I'm pretty sure it all started with Barbie. To the casual observer, my reaction to Winslow's games may seem a little extreme. The thing is, I have one quirk. Not exactly a fortune, more like a small problem. I love cleanliness. When I was a child, this was a problem. I grew up in a house with a lot of boys, so for as long as I can remember, I was surrounded by dirt. Dirty dishes, dirty clothes, dirty sports equipment, and football boots scattered throughout the house. My parents kept order as best they could, and when I grew up, I helped them. But no matter how quickly we cleaned up, my brothers cleaned up the mess even faster. My parents threatened and punished me, but even I knew that they were being gentle. I think my brother tried to clean up after himself, but it was always, "I'll leave my mitten here for just a minute," or, "I promise I'll put my boots away later." With 4 boys, a few minutes here and a few minutes there made the living room look like a city dump. Because of my problems with cleanliness and my brother's problems with dirt, I was effectively banished from the living room, kitchen, and any other room the boys occupied. Luckily, there was one place in the house where I could always escape the clutter: my bedroom. But I wasn't entirely comfortable there either. My mother, overjoyed to finally have a daughter, decorated it in her version of the perfect little girl's room: a pink four-poster bed, lampshades, lace curtains, and frilly country-style furniture. To me, it was just another kind of clutter, a slightly more acceptable form of clutter. Needless to say, I was not a fan of his. I dreamed of clean lines, lumpy surfaces, neutral shades. When I turned 9, the official age for choosing bedroom furniture in the Collins family, I hatched a plan to transform my mother's girlish gulag into the perfect fortress of solitude. The first step was a trip to IKEA. Oh, IKEA. This is where I regret that I am not a better writer. I wish I could find words to express the joy I feel when I walk into IKEA. I am reminded of a quote from Alex DeLarge. "Oh, bliss, bliss in paradise. Oh, it was magnificent, and the magnificence kept growing. It was like a bird made of the rarest celestial metal, or like silver wine flowing in a spaceship. Gravity is all nonsense now. When I was swimming, I imagined such beautiful pictures." Of course, Alex is a fictional gangster talking about Beethoven, and I'm a disgraced divorcee talking about Swedish furniture, but the spirit is the same. I'm sure I don't have an ounce of Scandinavian blood in me, but my little teenage heart was racing with delight as I strolled through the store's small, perfect bedrooms, each meticulously furnished with the perfect amount of minimalist furniture. Everywhere I looked, there were straight lines and uncluttered spaces. Honestly, IKEA still gives me heart palpitations. Baboot, I spent the better part of the month leading up to my birthday drooling over the IKEA website, so I had everything picked out before we even got in the car. An hour after arriving at the store, my parents and I left with a Billy bookcase, a small Einol desk, and a retented bed with drawers for all my toys and art supplies. In our basket, we also had a set of prevert panel blinds and an interrogateur LED table lamp. A few hours of knocking, screwing, and swearing, and my bedroom was ready. Looking at her, my eyes filled with tears, and my vision blurred. She was perfect. My dad and I created an oasis, a place of immaculate surfaces and bright lighting, pastel colors and industrial shag carpet. All is clear. Everything is in its place. I finally had the refuge I had been dreaming of. Of course, as in any other shelter, uninvited guests were waiting outside the gates. In my case, the barbarian horde consisted of my brothers, Ethan, Logan, Brendan, and Liam. I took precautions. She attached the necessary sign to her door. "No boys allowed." To prove I was serious, I ditched the traditional pink color and printed it in a blood-red font, with white 36-point Arial bold lettering. And in case they decide that I'm joking, I signed at the bottom in 14th MT bold font, "I am completely serious." It seemed to work. Most of the time, the barbarians did not enter my room. There wasn't much there to interest the teenage boys, and I'm sure the imposing order and the persistent smell of antiseptic air spray offended their delicate sensibilities. When Brendan said my bedroom was like an operating room, I almost cried with gratitude. This was one of the few times with my brothers that I felt noticed. Looking back, I don't think he meant it as a compliment. The first invader to break through the gate was my older brother, Ethan. His attack was caused by a rather severe fixation of the mouth. He was very bad at it. It later developed into a rather serious smoking habit. But by the age of 15, he was content to chew on things he found around the house, things like pencil tips, pink erasers, and my Barbies. At the time, I thought Ethan was some kind of depraved monster, but I've since learned that the crunch of Barbie's chewing legs has a certain popularity among obsessives. Chewing. And apparently, chewing on my Barbies while watching Friends reruns was just the thing that helped Ethan relax after a long day of school and soccer practice. I discovered this Ethan habit when I tried to put my endless summer Barbie in a pair of particularly cute Louboutin pumps, but they kept falling off. Taking a closer look, I discovered that Endless Summer no longer had toes on its feet. Before we continue, a quick note about Barbie. Colombian musician Kaliu once said, "I am not a Barbie doll. I'm just a multi-dimensional human being who likes to create things." I believe that Kaliu learn can go to hell. I know. Die-hard feminists believe that Barbie is a terrible role model for little girls, causing them to develop a variety of eating disorders, addiction to high heels, and an obsession with RuPaul's Race Royale. I almost disagree with this. Barbie is an underrated feminist icon. She can be a lawyer and a judge, a firefighter and a policeman, an astronaut and a president. Can do any job, overcome any difficulties. And no matter what she does, she always has the right wardrobe, tailored to suit her. We have to admit, non-standard figure type. Each accessory is perfectly suited to her style, to her figure, perfectly tailored to her needs. She's the toy of all toys and, despite her unhealthy obsession with the color pink, she's the perfect role model for every little girl and every aspiring drag queen. I still dream about Barbie's life, and I'm almost 30 years old. Having discovered Barbie's ruined legs, I ran to my mother, who yelled at Ethan, who sulked and was offended by me. Nothing happened for a few days, and then the flight attendant's dream Barbie showed up, with teeth marks on her toes. Everything happened again, only now all 4 of my brothers laughed at me for being a sneak. By the time Ethan had Moondream Barbie's feet in his mouth, I realized that nagging Mom wouldn't help. So I took it to the next level. I went to Dad. I shuffled into my dad's office, feigning despondency, as I did whenever I wanted my parents to know that I was very upset. Dad, immersed in his computer, waved me towards a comfortable chair on the other side of the room, completely not noticing my Oscar-winning performance. While Dad was finishing work, I looked around. The office wasn't as clean or organized as my room. There were knickknacks on the bookshelves and a few stray post-it notes stuck to the desk. But underneath the cozy, lived-in decor, I could see a thoughtful layout. Everything my father needed was at hand. The printer next to the paper next to the pens next to him. I would work a little harder to declutter, but I can respect the planning and organization. "Hello, pumpkin," he said, finally looking up. Then he took in my expression, especially my lower lip, which stuck out enough to deserve its own zip code. "Hey, what is this?" I held back for a long time so everything spilled out. "It's Ethan, Dad. He keeps chewing on Barbie's toes." The father's face turned red and his mouth slammed shut. Seeing his expression, I felt vindicated. He, like me, was clearly stunned by the cruelty with which my dolls were treated. Inspired, I continued. "What should I do, Dad? Barbie's shoes keep falling off." Dad bit his lip and his eyes seemed to be watering. I felt a wave of kinship. Dad understands. He hiccuped, said something vaguely comforting, and hugged me. I could feel him shaking. I had barely told him about Ethan's abuse of Barbie, and he was already crying. After holding me for about a minute, he pulled away and looked at me. His cheeks were flushed, and his eyes were filled with unshed tears. He sighed excitedly and smiled softly. "What do you want to do about it, honey?" "I want Ethan to stop, Dad. And I want to fix my Barbie's toes." Dad nodded. "Well, fixing your Barbies isn't that hard. Just bring them to me tonight and I'll see what I can do." Then his expression became serious. "But fixing Ethan might be a little more difficult. I assume you've already talked to your mom about this." I nodded. "And what did she say?" I folded my arms over my chest. "She yelled at Ethan. Then he did it again. I told my mom, and she yelled at him again. And he did it again." He leaned back in his chair. "Looks like it's true. Your brothers are a little stubborn." He sighed. "And I assume you realized that she would probably talk to him, he would probably apologize, and then it would all start all over again?" I nodded again. Dad looked thoughtful, then leaned towards me. "Pumpkin, have you ever heard the saying that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results?" I shook my head. Albert Einstein said this. He was a very smart guy. I bet you can guess what that means, right? Perhaps this means that if something doesn't work, you shouldn't continue to do it. He stroked my head. That's right, baby. So if Mom tells Ethan to stop, it won't make him stop, will it? He smiled at me, and I felt warm happiness. I loved it when Dad talked to me like an adult, asked questions, and actually listened to my answers. It made me feel important. Everything's under control. Sorry, Pumpkin, but there's not much I can do that your mom hasn't done. We can punish Ethan. In fact, I'm sure he'll pay for your next batch of Barbies. But he will most likely continue to chew on Barbie's fingers. The brothers' taunts. Cry, baby, finished me off. And I didn't want to whine, at least not in front of my dad. But the injustice was stronger than I could keep to myself. But this is unfair. Dad sighed. Not fair. Sometimes things are unfair. He paused for a moment and looked at me as if he was measuring me, deciding whether I was ready for the harsh truth. I sat up straighter and looked into his eyes. Honey, look at it this way, he said. If yelling at Ethan doesn't help and punishing Ethan doesn't help, then you have to find something that will help. How does Ethan find your Barbies? I leave them in the TV room. His mouth pressed into a straight line. So, let's figure it out. Ethan was sitting in the TV room, probably watching CSI or something. Friends. He nodded. Okay, Friends. So he's watching Friends and sees your Barbie on the floor. Being in a chewing mood, he decides to pick her up and taste her fingers. Does everything seem to be correct? I felt my face frown. Yes. Dad rubbed his chin. What if Barbie wasn't on the floor? What do you think he would have done then? I blinked. I don't know. Maybe find something else to chew. He smiled slightly. I think so too. He put me on his lap and hugged me. Listen, I know it's terrible that your brother is ruining your Barbies, and it's even worse that you have to find a way to solve this problem yourself. But now is the time to learn something important. Sometimes it's up to you to deal with the problem that's bothering you. So what are you going to do? Clean up my Barbies? He nodded. Maybe we should make a special place for them? He smiled at me as if I was a genius. Sounds like a good idea. Maybe one of the drawers in your new bed will become a Barbie drawer? I nodded. The idea was quite attractive. The truth is, I got into Barbie because of the accessories. She had everything, and could easily imagine turning one of my drawers into the perfect Barbie wardrobe EO stash post-apocalyptic bunker. I was already imagining rows of Tupperware containers, each filled with different items of clothing, cosmetics, or accessories. How would I organize them by color, to size, by number of items? My head was spinning with the possibilities. I smiled at my father. Thank you, Dad. I'll go and check now. Anytime, Pumpkin. 2 days later, I had all new Barbies, paid for by Ethan. Each had a full set of toes, and they lay in their shelter in a neat row, like little soldiers slumbering in their molded plastic sarcophagi. And, as I expected, their accessories were stacked in matching plastic IKEA containers, which I mostly organized by size, although occasionally organized by purpose, and sometimes by color. Everything was perfect, at least until a week later when I found Malibu Dream Barbie on the floor of the TV room with half her legs missing. I froze. What's happened? Did I really leave her unattended? Was I really unable to protect my Barbie from the barbarian at the gate? I ran to my room. Everything looked almost the same, but I noticed that the Barbie drawer was open and the sheet was caught at the edge. My face turned red. I would never let the sheet get caught like that. I clenched my hands into fists. Ethan tracked her down. I remembered my conversation with my father. Quarrels won't help me, as well as making Ethan pay for new dolls. My Barbie bin was empty. Clearly, it's time to take matters into our own hands. Finding a new hiding place was easy. I made a box for my girls and hid it in the shoe rack in the closet. I wondered for a second why there was no Anne Frank Barbie, but then dismissed the thought. Her clothes were too boring. My Barbies were safe in their new sanctuary, but Ethan still needed his punishment. It's not even about Malibu Dream, Barbie anymore. There is only one place in the house where I am safe from the noise and disorder of my brothers. One place where I can isolate myself from the rest of the world. The one place where I feel safe. And Ethan invaded there, made it a steal, ruined my bed. And now he will pay. Ethan was 6 years older than me, weighed twice as much as me, and was at least 30 centimeters taller, so beating him was out of the question. Tit-for-tat behavior was also out of the question. His toys were football pads designed to withstand the fury of rambunctious, insecure teenage boys desperate to prove their masculinity. My teeth can't get through them. Revenge requires strategy, not force. Brains, not brawn. Determination, not teeth. And if it's really effective, Ethan should never know it was me. The thought was spinning in my head about what his revenge for my revenge could be. Maybe he'll take my fingers. It took a few weeks, but I finally came up with a plan. Ethan had soccer practice every afternoon and most of Saturday. He would come home tired, throw his sweaty t-shirt, smelly cleats, and dirty shin guards in the living room, then stagger into the children's bathroom, where he would shower and dry off with a towel, a black sheet hanging behind the bathroom door. 2 weeks after Malibu Dream Barbie lost her toes, I went to the bathroom at 5 o'clock, about half an hour before Ethan usually got home from practice. But this time, instead of toilet paper, I used Ethan's towel and dried herself thoroughly. By the time Ethan finished screaming, half the family was in the bathroom and the other half was in the hallway. He cried. Dad led Logan and Brendan out into the hallway, and Mom whispered to him and tried to take the towel away. Dad closed the door. My parents never found out which of us did it. We were all suspect. As the eldest child, Ethan ruled with an iron fist, and I wasn't the only one struggling under his not-so-benevolent dictatorship. We all had motive and opportunity. Unable to find a better solution, Mom and Dad went with the standard high-level punishment. You're in trouble, now you're in trouble. They sent us all to bed early and told us there would be no dessert this week. In retrospect, it's not surprising that my brothers didn't think twice about trashing the house. My parents were exceptionally bad disciplinarians. That night, lying in bed, I felt excited. I had taken revenge, and I had gotten away with it. I remembered Ethan's sobs and smiled. And who's the crybaby now? Over the next week, both my parents apologized to me for the punishment. They, of course, understood that their little princess could not play such a cruel joke on her brother, but they needed to be fair, and they punished me along with my brothers. I assured them that I understood and accepted my punishment stoically, trying my best not to smirk at my brother's complaints about the lack of dessert. On the one hand, my revenge was useless. The stripes on Ethan's face would not give Barbie her legs back or make him stop chewing my dolls. He will still do things that make me angry, and if I let my guard down, he might even destroy another of my dolls. He will always be stronger. He will always have cooler toys. But this night everything was fair. The scales were balanced. I was in charge. Over time, this feeling passed, but I still felt a little nervous every time I saw Ethan's new white towel. Over the next few years, my brothers would periodically break into my room, and I would always retaliate against them. Sometimes their textbooks would go missing the night before a vital exam, or their toothbrushes would taste strange, like toilet cleaner. One day, some fiberglass insulation got into Logan's groin guard, ruining his wrestling match and giving him a suspicious rash, which earned him a lecture from his dad about safe sex. Balancing the scales of justice was exciting, but also scary. I loved the creative, naughty ideas that would creep into my brain, but the more I indulged them, the more they pushed me. I realized that if you don't take care of yourself, these little pranks can be the first steps towards becoming a monster. In college, it was easier to ignore my brilliant ideas for revenge. Let's start with the fact that I was busy. The economics program was very strict, and I was one of the few girls, so I felt obligated to bust a little ass in my classes. Besides, the college environment was much simpler. while the girls in my dorm weren't going to win awards for cleanliness. There's a difference between 4 messy brothers and 28 girls still honing their cleaning skills. But after Christmas break during my freshman year of college, I ran into a problem. My roommate, Holly Elkins, upset about her boyfriend's absence, dropped out, and was replaced by Danielle. "Call me Danny!" Steinberg. Danny was classic bubbly, girl hippie, both in character and in general body shape. Loud, cheerful laughter, large elastic breasts, large elastic butt. Outwardly, everything about her was friendly, elastic, and round. But inside, I discovered I was a bad girl. Danny was sloppy in just about every way it was possible to be sloppy. For a week, her clothes were spread out on every flat surface in our dorm room, making it more or less impossible for her to find textbooks, paper, pens, a calculator, everything she needed to be a real student. That's why she took mine. Basically, Danny believed that everything that belonged to me was ours, and everything that belonged to her was the flooring. God knows, I tried to find a common language with her. Opening the door to the chaos, I put a smile on my face and began to pack my things. After a couple of weeks of this routine, I began to feel like the otter I once saw at the zoo. The water in its enclosure was warm and cloudy, and it compulsively swirled around in it, desperately trying to cleanse itself. Watching her, I felt a kinship. I realized that she was going crazy, spinning around herself, trying to wash off the dirt, while her fur was clogged with fresh dirt. Life with Danny was like that. Only, unlike the otter, I had a small evil part of my mind coming up with dozens, no, hundreds, of diabolical ideas for revenge. It was like I had a superpower that I constantly had to turn off so no one could see. I started to think of it as a voice, my little voice of revenge, always ready to give advice on how to balance the scales of justice. By the end of January, Danny and I shared a room in half. It became like a funhouse parody of a deranged mind. On one side, the insides of a Cirque du Soleil clothes dryer, on the other, cleanliness fit for an operating theater. Then the sarcastic comments began. As anyone who's ever lived in a sorority house can attest, it's the little things. Eye rolls, barbs about your roommate cleaning up again. We soon became practically a meme on the floor. Fun Danny and crazy Ashley. And when I complained about a missing notebook or a missing calculator, my eyes would roll. Crazy Ashley comments would appear, and my stock would drop a little more. In just a few weeks, Danny transformed our floor from a bit boring. The freshman dorms were a cross between Mean Girls and Lord of the Flies, and I became Piggy. Despite this, I kept my voice of revenge under lock and key. I could handle the mess, the snark, the petty theft, the eye-rolling. After all, there were only a few months left until the end of the semester. And then I would be rid of Funny Danny for good. This didn't do much to improve the atmosphere in the room. By the end of freshman year, we could barely see each other without it escalating into a shouting match. Well, at least we were honest. So, a little time to clear up some points. First of all, let's talk about my little voice of revenge. For the record, I want it to be known that this is my voice, and not some demon or the neighbor's dog or some such crap. I have some problems, obviously, but multiple personality disorder, schizophrenia, and borderline personality disorder are not among them. As for the classic nervous trio, attention deficit disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and autism, well, not everything is clear yet. I've never taken a test because I really don't want to see what the results are. It doesn't take a Freud to know that I have the classic symptoms of all 3 disorders, and I don't want to become another crazy woman whose problems are reduced to a convenient diagnosis. I made bad decisions. She did stupid things. And, as far as I understand, everything else, overwork, self-doubt, attention deficit disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder, or obsessive-compulsive disorder, etc., well, these are just excuses. One of the positive aspects of my time in the break room was that I met Mickey Collins, a fellow academically inclined girl who also had a penchant for organization. As a result, We lived together until the end of college. And while there were a few fights over categorizing our spices alphabetically rather than by cooking recipes, she was kind enough not to comment on the fact that I organize my underwear by color, level of wear, and material. I think that's why we're still friends. In general, at the beginning of the second year, we moved in together. By Christmas, I even started dating. Most college guys, I've discovered, are a lot like my brothers, at least when it comes to running a home. Being enlightened millennials, they didn't expect me to clean up after them. However, they also didn't feel that their enlightened feminism in any way obligated them to clean up after themselves. So for most of them, spending time with them meant getting into the dirt. However, most of these guys were good for a few weeks or months, and I soon learned that if I left before they fell asleep, I didn't have to see their bedrooms in the harsh light of day. Even better, some of them agreed to stay with me, where the chances of contracting dysentery or bacterial infection were much less. After college, I worked in finance, which fulfilled my need for order. Numbers always add, 1 + 1 always equals 2, no matter how many zeros come after the ones. And while there's a little wiggle room when it comes to things like insider trading or creative accounting, we're all generally pretty aware of where the moral and legal lines lie. Money also has no conscience, and this is very important to my sense of balance. After all, if you're an idiot, or if your consultant is an idiot and you don't have the sense to fire him, then you probably deserve to lose your money. Watching my clients succeed while other investors failed fed the part of me that believed virtue should be rewarded and vice punished. I may be the only one in the world who rooted for Bernie Madoff. If you're stupid and rich enough to invest in this guy, you clearly need to get a real job. If you're in finance and ambitious, you want to be on Wall Street. However, given my obsession with hygiene and my strong, if idiosyncratic, sense of right and wrong, I would never work at Savlemoy Brothers or one of the other fraternal firms on Wall Street. Instead, I ended up with Pierce, Bateman, Green, Potter, and McDuck, a well-established investment firm that had the best retention rate on Wall Street. This was partly due to the office environment. Rather than relying on fear, harassment, and illegal substances to force brokers to work 100+ hours a week, Pierce and Bateman used smart planning, ample staffing, and naked greed. We still worked long hours. 60-hour weeks were common, but we didn't experience anything like the burnout seen at other firms. And although our starting salaries were much lower, as we moved up the career ladder, the situation evened out. Moreover, Pierce and Bateman were looking for employees willing to look to the future, those who were ready to count on a long and successful career, and not on a short and tough battle for a pot of gold this year. People wanting to have children and seeking the professional stability to make this possible. The stability worked both ways. Instead of the drunken parties rumored about at other companies, Pierce and Bateman hosted relaxed collegial happy hours on Thursdays, where we loosen our ties and got to know each other. Spouses were strongly encouraged to attend this event. Admittedly, the family atmosphere of Pierce and Bateman was a little more Corleone than Cleaver, and I, as one of the few employees who doesn't have a boyfriend, much less a husband, felt a little like Fredo. However, I was part of the family and in good company. Pierce and Bateman's low-key approach allowed them to hire the best. Well, except for Winslow Hubble. In some ways, Winslow had everything that Pierce and Bateman were looking for. He was well-dressed and affable, with the manners and jokes of a prep school graduate. He also had the necessary list of wealthy friends and relatives, many of whom were undoubtedly eager to join our list of clients. On the other hand, he was stunningly incompetent. I'm sure one of his college professors must have forced him to look at the income statement. But in Winslow's opinion, it might as well have been Urdu. And when it came to the jargon of our business, I once heard one of the partners ask Winslow about the company's EBITDA. EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, and it's one of the first metrics you look at when researching a company. In general, Winslow paused for a moment, grinned condescendingly, and said that he was not sure. He had never drank domestic beer. The poor partner just stood there and blinked. It was rumored that Winslow got his job thanks to his mom and dad. Although I don't know how true this is, I do know that the senior Hubbles invested more than $100 million in the company. Moreover, I was one of the fund's analysts tasked with making sure their money continued to grow at a healthy rate. On the surface, hiring Winslow was a monumental failure, but after working at Piers and Bateman for a while, I realized that it was actually a masterstroke. To the rest of the worker bees, Winslow was like a trophy, a visual reminder of what we all stand for. Of course, we didn't want to become his likeness. My God, he looked like 90 kilos of mashed potatoes crudely molded into the likeness of a man. But he was proof of what we could achieve. If we work hard enough, make enough money, build a strong enough client base, kiss enough ass, well then, maybe even if our kids are incompetent, bumbling oafs, they can still make six figures. Damn it, that's the American dream, right? Despite the company ban on overtime, I still managed to spend about 80 hours a week at my desk. I had nothing better to do. As far as dating goes, things are a little better in New York than in college. Some men are a little neater. But if I need someone to clean the house, it looks like I'll have to settle on an older man. For me, who has a healthy libido, this option was not so attractive. I decided to put the problem aside for later and resigned myself to working long hours and the occasional one-night stand. I decided that when my family situation started to interfere with my progress, I would find an older guy who could clean up after himself. Well, or I'll look in the mail-order groom's catalog. When it comes to finding casual one-night stands, Mickey Collins was a lifesaver. She also lived in the city and dragged me to all the sticky, sweaty music venues around New York. In fact, that's how I met my husband, Charlie. We were at a We Were Promised Jetpacks concert, and I was carrying two solo plastic cups filled with overpriced Budweiser beer when the crowd pushed him in front of me. I zigzagged when I was supposed to, and one beer ended up on it. Luckily, it was my beer that was on Charlie's shirt. If things had turned out differently, we might never have talked, let alone gotten married. I know this about myself, and I'm not proud of it. He took it surprisingly well, much better than I would have done. And when he told me that I wet his third favorite t-shirt, so I definitely owed him a dance, I knew this was one I had to take seriously. I've discovered that most men don't sort their t-shirts very carefully, and I've come to appreciate those who do. Of course, dancing was also a plus. When I saw Charlie's apartment 2 weeks later, I knew I was in love. Everything was from IKEA, from Screami LED lights, to Scub drawer organizers. I also admired the way he folded his socks and organized them by color. Don't think I'm admitting to looking into his drawers. Often. As for sex, with Charlie it was something more than what I was used to before. That doesn't mean we didn't go crazy sometimes, and in our bedroom it was even worse. We had thin walls, and after a few months, I found that I could no longer look my neighbors in the eye. There were some wonderful details, too. Plus, he was more than willing to give up his time for weekly happy hours, which helped me transform from Fredo to Michael. And while he was willing to put up with the standard barrage of boring conversations and corporate bragging after he met Marty Hubble, wife Winslow, he seemed to really blossom. Watching them talk at the corner table, I sometimes felt a pang of jealousy, but mostly I was grateful that my husband was willing to work so hard to help my career. He even allowed me to invite almost the entire team to our wedding, which took place about a year after we met. As for work, the wedding also turned out to be successful. When I was given the ring, I had already been working as a junior analyst for 3 years, which put me at a loss for promotion to full analyst. And 2 months after the ring, there was a promotion. I want to be clear, although Charlie helped me with my situation at work, that is not why I fell in love with him. And that is definitely not why I married him. Why did I fall in love with Charlie? With him, I was either wild and outrageous, or rough and athletic, or yes, buttoned up and organized. I was more than I could imagine, and he was something more with me too. There was something between us that has no name, that went far beyond sex, beyond kinship, intimacy, and everything that I found in the arms of other guys. No matter how trite it may sound, I felt complete. I had a man who saw all of me and still loved me. The man who healed my wounds and strengthened my weakness. There are no words for it, and the terms you hear, my soulmate, the wind beneath my wings, the yin to my yang, don't even begin to reflect how deep my sense of belonging to the Charlie couple was. And Ashley. It was safe. It was exciting. It was as if he turned up the volume on the world, making everything more real. It was like my childhood bedroom, only better because I shared it with my ideal man. That is why 2 years after Winslow, Charlie remains the only man I've ever loved, and the only man I can imagine loving. The only man I've had sex with since that last terrible day, and the only man I want. Of course, we still had pitfalls and obstacles. Just because I fell in love, learned new things, and married the man of my dreams doesn't mean I became a different person or that my destructive tendencies magically disappeared. Quite the opposite. When two determined, slightly obsessive, neat freaks gather in a 37-square-meter apartment, essentially a square box 6 meters on a side, a certain amount of friction arises. Add in 2 high-stress jobs that leave Charlie and I exhausted by the end of the day, and then add no time to get organized during the week. This is not a recipe for domestic happiness. I was paying close attention to my need for control, but I completely missed a more important, and ultimately more detrimental, trend. Over time, as I poured all my energy into growing into a senior analyst position, I began to see Charlie as my life support system. When I returned home from work, it was he who kept me in good shape. When I needed help with a project, a different perspective on a problem, someone to run a last-minute errand, or just hug me and make me forget everything, he was there. He was always there. It wasn't Charlie's responsibility to take care of me, but he took it upon himself and I allowed it. I began to forget that loving me was Charlie's choice, not something he was paid to do, and forgetting about it, I became much less attractive. That's how the episode with the pants happened. First, let's admit it, the pants episode wasn't entirely my fault. When 2 clean-obsessed weirdos share a tiny apartment, it goes without saying that the end result is a pretty strict housekeeping routine. Every Saturday morning, we cleaned the apartment from top to bottom, and every 2 months, we did a deep cleaning. We took a few bags to the trash, a few to Goodwill, and then made love to the point of insanity in the middle of the freshly cleaned, freshly vacuumed living room floor. This was one of my favorite traditions. The morning in question was a day of spring cleaning. It all started when we took a huge load to the laundromat, which meant that both of our laundry bags were involved. 3 of my favorite dresses needed to be dry cleaned, and not having laundry bags, I put them in a trash bag. Yes, I know. What kind of idiot puts her favorite dresses in a trash bag on trash day? But even so, didn't it occur to Charlie to check the packages before dropping them off at Goodwill? Yes, Dr. Thompson, I admit it. I shift my blame. I loaded my husband with a lot of hard work on Saturday mornings. It was my job to check the packages. But still, and yes, I overreacted. I probably shouldn't have yelled at him. And when he ran out of the apartment, the smart man, rational, I could understand that she went a little too far. Reasonable a person would stop there. But no, I wasn't smart. Looking back, I already knew I shouldn't have waited until he was asleep and then thrown away all 12 pairs of his pants. And the next morning, when he texted asking where his pants were, I shouldn't have texted back. Check in Goodwill. The grinning emoji was too much. So, yes, I bear most of the blame, large part of the blame, maybe even all. But in my defense, there was a bright side to this pants fiasco. Before the purge, Charlie owned a lot of tacky pants from Uniqlo and H&M. Colored jeans, shiny trousers in a polyester blend. Sure, his job wasn't up to the same standards as mine, but you dress for the job you want. And his Uniqlo chinos said his dream job was working in the post office. Yes, I understand everything. Look, it's hard not to make excuses. As a result, I broke my husband's trust and destroyed our marriage. And that's not the worst part. The worst thing was that the episode with the pants awakened something in me. For years, I kept most of myself on a leash. And although I was shocked by my behavior, a part of me, more than I would like to admit, felt like she had been released from prison. Looking back, Charlie took the whole pants thing with incredible calm. He would probably have the right to walk out the door, or at least show up to my work evening in cut-off sweatpants. But no, he bought himself new trousers, had them made to order, and obediently came to 3 Olives, looking as the ideal model of a modern male financier spouse. Of course, I apologized to Gilbert and Sullivan. But despite the fact that everything seemed to be working out, problems still remained. We should have discussed everything, but instead Charlie remained silent for 4 days. It was effective. He was a talkative man, and his silence was louder than most people's shouts. This told me without words that he was seriously angry. The only thing is that I only realized later how deep this anger was. And yet I slowed down. I didn't stop at all. After all, the voice of a little revenge was out there, and it was hungry. Instead, I found myself looking for little things to punish, and then playing little pranks to even out the scales. I filled the sugar bowl with salt. She stole the book he was reading. She took all the marshmallows from his Lucky Charms cereal. Petty revenge for little things. Over time, we gradually returned to normal, or at least a new normal. Stocking up our wardrobes left us with no spending cash for a couple of months, and we had to look for free classes together. Or rather, I had to find them. As penance, I took it upon myself to plan our calendar. I found free concerts in central parks and sought out the best music acts on the subway. $2.5 subway fare for live music. I sought out small, unfamiliar museums around the city and kept track of their free admission days. As if I were a Catholic mother with 10 children and 5 bedrooms. We had picnics in cemeteries and spent lazy time on city beaches. We talked and laughed, discussed our big dreams and least favorite foods, and also the fact that most works of modern art are not worth a good word. We are closer than ever. And then Caitlin Kahn happened. I won't even pretend that my reaction to Caitlin was reasonable. When I met her at a 5-kilometer run sponsored by Charlie's company, she brought out voices in me that I didn't even know existed. There was the familiar voice of revenge, plus the voice of jealousy, the voice of insecurity, a completely fucking irrational voice. The thing is, Caitlin was very nice. She was a little shy and seemed a little uncomfortable in the thin sweatshirt and tights. I think she noted at least 3 times that these were not the usual thick sweaters and corduroy pants that she wears in the office. And I was completely nice too. Having managed the money of annoying old men from prep school, I knew how to put on a pleasant smile when dealing with people I would happily eviscerate. Caitlin and I chatted about all sorts of stupid things, where she bought her shoes and where she went to school, how long she'd been running, and the best diner in her area. A standard, superficial conversation between a devoted wife and her husband's friendly co-worker. But underneath the surface, I was seething. Watching Caitlin made me feel jealous and vulnerable. Looking at her, I saw the fragility of the shelter that Charlie and I had built. I wanted to lock the doors, board up the windows, hide my Barbies. I'd been to Charlie's office Christmas parties and met his co-workers, but this was the first time I realized, that is, really deeply realized, that he had a life outside of me. A beautiful woman looked up at him. Colleagues who rely on him, a job that matters to many. At Pearson Bateman, the sweetheart who came to the weekly happy hour to support me was Charlie. Every Thursday, he would watch me flirt and weave my way through a crowd of pretty, sexy men. If you like strong chins, expensive suits, and huge egos. He knew everything about my world, from the names of my colleagues' pets to the deadlines for my projects. God, when I remember how much time he spent talking to Winslow with a fake smile on his face, while that slime was bragging covertly or not so covertly, I think Charlie might deserve a Nobel Prize, or at least holiness. But when it came to his work, I was an absentee wife. I didn't know if his company had happy hours or if he attended them. I didn't know about his work projects, or what he did in general. And then a terrible thought occurred to me. What if the only reason we went to the Central Park run that day was because I loved to run, and Charlie knew I would have fun? I felt the blood drain from my face. What does it say about our relationship that I only came to his events when I liked them? I thought I heard thunder in the distance. A storm is on the horizon, threatening to destroy my perfect life. As I watched Charlie with Caitlin, I realized that my willingness to ignore half of Charlie's life had left the door open for potential predators. Clever man. Rational. Would have taken advantage of the wake-up call and looked a little deeper into her husband's work life. For me, all I could focus on was the fact that a beautiful woman was giving my husband dreamy looks, and he wasn't pushing her away. My jealous side was saying, "Oh, hell no!" And my little vindictive side was hatching the idea of cutting it. One strand at a time, no scissors. My rational side seemed to be packing for a trip to Rio. As we walked back to our apartment, I looked at Charlie silently. I'm sure he saw my anger by the angle of my jaw, by the stiffness of my movements. When we finally talked, he did everything right, minimized his relationship with Caitlin, talked about how much he loved me, flirted until I wasn't happy, but at least calmed down. How did he tolerate me? How could he tolerate my behavior? Even after 2 years of working with Dr. Thompson, I still can't figure it out. When I got home, I did exactly what you would expect a jealous, immature, guilty wife to do. I made love to him. Maybe I was hoping that I would leave him so devastated that he would have nothing left to give to Caitlin or the other women in his office. Maybe I hoped that he would be so overwhelmed by how wonderful I was that he wouldn't give in to temptation, or maybe she was just tense and excited. Anyway, I left him with so many hickeys and love bites that he looked like he'd gone 12 rounds with a giant squid. I decided to give my husband more attention, and, in the meantime, remind him of who he belongs to. In the weeks that followed, he sometimes made fun of the marks I left on his body, but it wasn't funny to me. I wanted him to see the imprint of my mouth every time he looked in the mirror. I wanted him to think about me every time he saw himself naked. I wanted to get into his shoes, give him a tattoo with my smell, taste, feeling of me. I wanted to be with him everywhere. Charlie's behavior in the following weeks did not reassure me, but I'm not sure there is anything that could reassure me. The voice of vengeance was going crazy, reminding me over and over again of the way Caitlin looked at him like a dreamy cow, not to mention the way she and Marty Hubble huddled together during happy hour, or ode-lighted the look he received from the barista at our neighborhood Starbucks. Having seen one threat, I now saw them everywhere, and yet I held on. Until Hell Week. Once a year, Charlie's office is in overdrive as it rushes to prepare for the publication of the company's annual report. His team suddenly goes from 8-hour days to 12-hour days, or even longer. I knew this would happen, but I wasn't prepared for the visual reminder that Charlie's world extended beyond our apartment, our marriage. On the first day of Hell Week, Charlie arrived home about 4 hours late and looked like he had been beaten to within an inch of his life. The last shreds of my rational side whispered that his dirty clothes, distant gaze, and obvious fatigue spoke of a long, brutal day at work. Meanwhile, jealous me stood with a megaphone, and the not-so-rational me, the new one who arrived around the same day that Charlie was running the race, heard thunder, felt another earthquake sweep through our cozy, comfortable oasis, and completely lost my temper. I still blush when I remember my poor husband barely standing on his feet as I scolded him for coming home late from work. How many times have I come home an hour, 2, 3 hours late, irritated and tired, demanding that he serve me? Doesn't matter. I heard the roar, saw dull looks, and was not in the mood to think sensibly. Before I let him fall into bed, I made him promise that, no matter what, he would respond to my text messages within 10 minutes. But even at that moment, I realized that I was going too far. God, I was a complete mess. But here's the thing, and I'm absolutely sure I'm not placing blame on the victim. I'm not alone in this. Charlie is also to blame. That week, whatever, even the first evening, would have been a very good time for him to talk to me about my behavior. Maybe he should have told me I was acting crazy. Or for that matter, he could have just pulled out his pants and given me a pointed look. Maybe he should have offered me counseling, or maybe he should have just yelled at me. I counted on Charlie to provide a happy, stable home for us, even if it meant conflict between us. It's probably unfair, but it's also true. Sometimes I think loving someone means telling them to get a grip. But instead of calling me to order, Charlie did everything he could to calm me down, which in turn fed the beast. Looking back, I understand that he was so accommodating because he cared about our relationship. But at the time, I wondered if he gave in so quickly because he was tormented by his conscience. There was no way for me to find out what was going on in Charlie's office. Hiring a private investigator would be too expensive, and other options, such as hacking his cell phone, planting a wiretap in his backpack, or installing a keylogger on his laptop, were also ineffective. After all, any communication with Caitlin should be face-to-face, away from the nearest convenient recording device. The only real solution was to become Charlie's supervisor, which I did. I constantly texted him, trying to catch him making a mistake. When he continued to text me back, I should have calmed down. After all, he clearly wasn't cheating on me, right? But no, I still couldn't shake the suspicion that somehow he still managed to sleep with someone behind my back. Instead of dispelling my doubts, each text message he replied only strengthened them. In the morning, when Charlie finally didn't answer, I felt almost relieved. Suddenly, all tension disappeared. There was no longer any reason to worry, no more reason to hold back his thirst for revenge. Charlie had made his decision, and all that remained was to devise a plan to restore balance. From what I've heard, people usually cheat because they're horny, or they don't respect their spouses, or they're control freaks, or they have some sort of, "Oh God, I'm getting old and I need to sleep with someone" syndrome. A stranger, feigned horror. None of these options applied to me. Well, maybe I had control problems. Okay? Maybe I was full of control issues. I saw Charlie as my man and taking care of me as his job. And I didn't feel like I was being cared for, so I took it upon myself to balance the scales. Yes, perhaps there was a respect issue here too. Of course, at that moment I didn't see any of this. All I saw was an incommunicado husband with a woman who was clearly ready to sleep with him and a few unaccounted hours in the office. An office with many closets and empty conference rooms, an office located just a couple of blocks from the Liberty Inn, an hourly hotel on the west side that claims to be the backwater of New York. How long has it been since Charlie and I visited Liberty? Ever since the pants episode? And how difficult is it for him and Caitlin to get out? And since we didn't have any afternoon fun, how likely is it that he's burning the sheets with a strange woman in a hotel that no one was told about? "Hell yes!" the jury exclaimed in unison, and their verdict was unanimous. "He's cheating! Burn it! Burn her! Restore balance!" But even when I decided that balance needed to be restored, I understood that having an affair was not as simple as just finding a strange man and jumping on him. I didn't want to turn things around. I already feel bad that Charlie is cheating on me. Us! But if I had fun with someone else, things would get very confusing. Then I will turn out to be the cheater, and Charlie will have the right to take revenge on me. And so the cycle begins. This is not about ruining my marriage. She is talking about saving him. At least, that's what I told myself. There are also financial problems. My job confines me to my desk, and I can't go scouring the financial district looking for someone to bring into my home. What if I can't control my new lover? What if he gives me something? So many unknowns, so much chaos. God, how I hate clutter. I've heard that many romances begin in the office. It's not hard to see why. There's opportunity, temptation, interaction, and plenty of horizontal surfaces. If I were looking for a real fling, if I wanted to cheat on my husband, maybe experience some feelings for someone else, basically turn my world upside down, my office would be the one-stop shop. Although Pierce and Bateman did not impose any physical fitness requirements or minimum hair product requirements on its employees, the office was full of gym-goers, with heads clogged with high-end protein gels and curl creams. The problem is that there are a lot of egoists here. The kind of egoists who claim that they decide whether to start or end an affair, and whether to rub it in the cuckold's face or not. The kind of egotists who get excited about winning a woman and tend to whisper about it in the office and at weekly happy hours. The kind of selfish people who wouldn't hesitate to ruin my career and my marriage for the sake of showing off. I need to find a guy who I can control, who will be happy to receive something unfamiliar, who will not interfere with my emotions, and who I have no problem leaving when the time comes. Ideally, someone from the office. I need Winslow Hubble. He's perfect, unattractive, not very smart, a complete scumbag with a lot to lose, and not smart enough to understand that I have even more to lose. That's how, 6 days later, I found myself staring at the ceiling and wondering if my husband had replaced the smoke detector next to Winslow. Sometimes you hear about cheaters who didn't expect to get caught and are surprised when their loving husband or wife starts screaming, yelling, and throwing things. This is not about me. On some level, I think I always expected Charlie to catch me doing this. I imagined that he would be upset with me, and I would respond by lashing out at him with rage about Caitlin and Marty, and we would have the big fight we needed and eventually get back to some kind of balance. I'll leave Winslow, Charlie will calm down about Caitlin and Martha, and we'll move on together. It was a good dream. I bet everything on Charlie's endless love for me, on his reasonableness, on his willingness to work things out. I never thought that he would just leave me. But that's exactly what he did. And this time, I didn't have a backup plan. When Charlie sent me a video of me and Winslow, I almost threw up. It was so disgusting. Charlie saw it all. I saw my most shameful moments. I heard, "Was Charlie laughing at me? Did you cry?" The shame lasted for several minutes, and then I was overcome with anger. How dare Charlie rub Winslow in my face? How dare he threaten me with divorce because of this? Did he not know what difficulties I went through to get us together? How difficult was it to find a way to forgive his betrayal without hurting yourself? God. The fact that I let this dirty shit in, just because Charlie has the video and I don't. How the hell can he be so up in arms? I felt like I was on fire, burning with anger. And to make matters worse, Charlie didn't even deign to stay home where I could yell at him, threaten him, attack him, cry in front of him, make him love me. I broke several things that first night. Okay, I broke a lot of things, including most of our dishes, glassware, framed pictures, and an umbrella. And then, being me, I cleaned everything up. I'm sure there are plenty of people who can completely lose themselves in a destructive rage and then collapse on the sofa and eat a pint of Ben & Jerry's. I'm not one of them. The only thing I didn't do was touch his clothes. We were long past the point where a few disappearing pants would balance the scales. My rational voice whispered that it was me who was throwing us off balance, but I drowned it out, buried it under several tons of rage and self-justification. Then I sent Charlie a bunch of angry text messages and phone calls. Then I got drunk. Then she sent several more phone messages that were more sentimental than angry. Then I went to bed. The next week was pure hell. I felt like the ugliest child in Siberia. I missed Charlie. It was like a physical illness. My skin ached from his touch. My stomach was clenching. It was empty inside me, just as empty as on his side of the bed. My chest was empty, dried out. It seemed to me that I could feel the wind piercing right through me. Charlie did not respond to my texts, phone calls, emails, or WhatsApp messages. Unfriended me on Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat. I thought about spying on his office, but his building has multiple entrances, and he could easily avoid me. I called his mom, who was clearly cold, and his dad, who didn't even bother to answer the phone. And then it dawned on me. I've met a few of his friends over the years, but I never got around to getting their contact information, as if I needed another reminder of what an inconsiderate wife I was. I remembered Charlie's silence on those days when I threw away his pants, and my horror intensified. This guy could teach my parents a lesson in punishment. There's nothing worse than him avoiding me. I had always been the cooler and more calculating of us, but after Winslow, Charlie put me to shame. With the help of a few surgical incisions, he completely erased himself from my life. The day after he left, I returned from work and discovered that his things were missing. A week later, a bailiff stood on my doorstep with a manila envelope in his hands. Charlie wanted to take half of our shared savings and a few things from the apartment. We would keep our retirement accounts, and he offered to let me keep all the furniture. The deal was fair, perhaps even generous. This kind of deal is offered when they want to get everything over with quickly. I was furious. I again turned to his parents, but achieved nothing. Charlie talked to my parents, and they weren't any help either. Dad said he was very disappointed in me, and Mom shed tears. I wondered if they were trying to figure out how to send me to my room and deprive me of dessert. I didn't have enough money to hire a good lawyer, but I did everything I could to stall for time, waiting until the last minute to respond to his divorce petition, demanding hearings, demanding counseling. I couldn't stop the process, but I slowed it down. All I want, I told his lawyer, is contact opportunities to talk. After 2 months of delay, I achieved my goal. Charlie wrote me a letter. Dear Ashley, phew, he called me by my full name. I'm trying to make things simpler. I still love you, I think I always will. But I can't erase the memories of you and Winslow. And even if it were possible, I can't spend the next 50 or 60 years wondering when or if I'll piss you off again. And I certainly cannot live in fear of what exactly you will do for your next revenge. In 2 years, you went from destroying my pants to destroying my faith in you. I'm terrified to think about what you might destroy next time. I tried to be gentle about this. I told both of our families that you did something that irreparably destroyed our marriage. While I'm sure they could fill in the gaps, I didn't do it for them. I also didn't show the video to anyone. Moreover, I didn't even watch the last one. After watching one, I didn't need to watch anything else. So, sign the papers. If you don't do this, I will pull out both videos and tell our family and friends exactly what caused the end of our marriage. And my explanation will be well illustrated. Let's part on good terms. Let's rebuild our lives. Let me go. Charlie. I'm sure I had a lot to take away from this, but the main thing was that Charlie never saw my last time with Winslow. I blushed at the thought that he had seen it, and felt a strange sense of relief that he had not seen the worst thing. Of course, I didn't like the idea of my parents, my in-laws, my friends, and my co-workers seeing me tumbling around in bed with Winslow, but I knew I could get through it. The hardest thing would be with Charlie. It's enough that he saw me with Winslow, but to see what happened on the last day, it's a humiliation I can hardly stand. And then Charlie threatens me. And this is the man who allowed me to destroy his wardrobe, who gave so much of himself to help my career, who made my world so much bigger. I knew he was telling the truth when he said he loved me, but he is also telling the truth when he says he will destroy me if I continue to fight the divorce. And then I realized that this was not a tactic, a practical joke, or a negotiation. Charlie is going to leave me. I will be alone, lonelier than ever before, if only because now I know what it's like not to be alone. I felt something crumble inside me. It was as if I had exploded or withdrawn into myself. It was as if I had finally been completely swallowed up by emptiness. I wrote him a reply. Dear Charlie, you won. If you promise to destroy the videos, I will sign. With love, your Ash. His answer was short. Working. I promise. Charlie. I signed the papers. A few months later, we divorced. Once I accepted the inevitable, the divorce was easy. Charlie allowed me to keep the apartment, half the money and most of the furniture, at least what was left after my tantrum. I ended up moving in with Mickey Collins in a small, ultra-modern apartment in Battery Park City. It was close to work, and the area was beautiful in a Logan's Run kind of utopian future. In general, this is how I imagine Toronto. And yet, I missed our small, cozy neighborhood. The Zabara store on the corner, the old Irish bar on the next street. Most of all, I missed Charlie. I later learned that he had moved in with his friend Aaron in Jackson Heights and then rented an apartment there. On the one hand, it was Queens, so I was clearly winning. On the other hand, I sometimes imagine Charlie in Little India, Little Thailand, or Little Mexico, wandering through curry shops, street sari shops, and open-air markets, on amazing adventures, without me. And then I realized that I had lost. I threw myself into my work, going inside as soon as the doors opened, staying there until the cleaners escorted me out. I told myself that I came early because my commute to work now took 15 minutes on foot, and that I left late because there wasn't much nightlife in Battery Park City. It was easier to deceive myself than to admit that I had made work my life because I had ruined my real life. For several months, Winslow tried to date me, but it was easy to push him away. I said that I didn't want to mess up the divorce case, that I wasn't ready, that my work was killing me, that I was depressed, all the standard excuses, and he, being Winslow, nodded his head, said, "Yes, that makes sense," and looked at me with puppy dog eyes, letting me know what he wanted. After our 6 days together, the puppy dog eyes had no effect on me. Marty Hubble still came to happy hour at 3 Olives. She seemed normal, but there was some sadness in her. Maybe part of it had to do with the fact that, without Charlie to keep her company, she was forced to hang out with the rest of the wannabe trophy wives from Aqua Mist. Sometimes she looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes. Anger, a pity, I hope, anger. A year after my divorce, Winslow took a vacation, and when he returned a month later, he could not meet my gaze, or anyone else's. Then Marty stopped showing up at Thursday evening gatherings. From what I heard, they broke up. A few months after Winslow Light arrived in the office, I started dating again. Mickey finally put her foot down and said that either I would start living again or she would start looking for a new roommate who, and I quote, doesn't make you happy every time she opens her mouth. Mickey really has a way with words. We went to a few shows together, Arctic Monkeys at Webster Hall, Gogol Bordello at a place in Bushwick, before ending up at the We Were Promised Jetpack show in downtown Brooklyn. I should have known what was coming next. We Were Promised Jetpacks wasn't that popular, but it still took me by surprise. I ran into him in the smoking area and was so shocked that I tripped and splashed beer on my t-shirt, but didn't pay any attention to it. When he saw me, his eyebrows went up. Apparently, he was surprised too. We looked at each other for a while, both waiting for what the other would say. Finally, I broke the silence. "Truce?" He smiled. "Truce." I wiped down one of the benches. Sanitary napkins fit easily into my purse and are a girl's best friend. Meanwhile, he watched what was happening with a half smile on his face. I gave him a deliberate look. "You're laughing, aren't you?" A smile spread. "Even too much. Will you also wash the sidewalk?" "Ass." He chuckled. "Well, are you going to sit down or what?" I asked. "I'm still thinking." "Is it safe?" I smiled back at him. "There are no microbes." "You make a compelling case," he said, sitting down. We exchanged a couple of phrases. "Where are you today? What are you doing? Have you heard about—" He grinned strangely when I mentioned Winslow giving up and Marty leaving. I made a mental note to ask him about it later. Every now and then a hipster would come up to us and we would sit on a bench so our legs were almost touching. The centimeters that separated us were killing me. It seemed to me that I could feel the warmth of his knee on my skin. After a while, we had no time for this. 2 years of separation were too rich and too empty. For my part, I wasted my time in long hours at work and grueling therapy sessions. For Charlie, it was visiting and exploring, filled with small, obscure restaurants, bodegas, and yes, sari shops in deepest, darkest Queens. But at the same time, no dates, or, at least, important dates. Finally, he gave me a look that meant it was time to rip off the Band-Aid. "Why did you do this, Ash?" he asked quietly. My heart beat faster when I heard him say my name. Throughout my life, hundreds, maybe thousands, of people have called me Ash, but no one could make me feel the way I felt when that tiny 2-letter word came crashing out of his lips. I blushed. "You can probably guess," I said, looking at my hands. "I was angry and scared. You were there for everyone, and I needed you completely, and you gave it to me. One day I realized that you give me a lot, and I don't give you nearly as much." His face darkened. "You thought that you were depriving me and that's why you decided to cheat? I don't think that makes sense." I sighed. I knew it wasn't balanced for me. We were out of balance. Not balanced. His eyes sparkled with humor, and for a moment I remembered other evenings, other concerts. I felt such severe pain that I froze. "So why didn't you try to balance us out?" he asked. "That would be logical, wouldn't it?" I tried to smile back at him, but I'm sure I failed. That's exactly what I should have done. But as soon as I realized that I had failed with you, I began to see danger everywhere. I soon convinced myself that you would find yourself a better deal, that you had already found a better deal. "Best deal," he snorted. "So did you ever realize that I didn't cheat on you?" "Yes, in the first week of therapy. And then I realized why we couldn't overcome my jealousy." I cast a death glare at the goth girl looking at our bench, and she jumped to the side. "Whatever you told me back then, Caitlin has a boyfriend. Caitlin has a girlfriend. Caitlin is an android. Whatever it was, I wasn't going to believe you. I was so sure that I was right, so sure that there simply could not be another answer. I would ignore anything you said." He looked impressed. "And you achieved this in just 1 week of therapy?" I smiled mirthlessly. "It took me 3 months to understand this particular part. I'm still trying to understand how it could have gone so far. Why did I sabotage myself, us, so completely?" "And what did you come to?" I grinned. "Well, 2 years after the divorce, thousands of dollars in therapy. And this is what I came to. I was definitely in my own little world. I was incredibly selfish, and I burned out my marriage." I snorted. "What the hell? This was just the beginning." He didn't smile back. "But why Winslow?" "Oh, everything is simple here." I leaned my back against the wall. "Winslow is not worth a word. He is easy to convince, easy to control, and he would never give me away. Most likely I chose him exactly. That's why he was so terrible. I knew that there was no way I could fall in love with him." I gave Charlie another hesitant smile. "And I would have gotten away with it too, if it weren't for you damn children." He smiled back at me with uncertainty. "You know that there was no way I could stay with you." "Not after this." "Yes, your email showed that clearly." Among the clouds of mango vape, I caught the smell of cigarette smoke. Someone was actually smoking in the smoking area. I wondered if any of the random hipsters hanging around were going to call a bouncer. "What I don't understand is why you never took revenge on me and Winslow." "I can't live with this. I'll have to balance the scales." "Balance the bowls. Who's to say I didn't do it?" He looked thoughtful. "About a year after our divorce, I met Winnie. I had a little time and I learned about everything, about all his little demons, and he laid them out on the table." He grinned. "The fact is that his whole idea of himself was like a house of cards, built on favors from his parents, on scandals that they hushed up, on events that they organized. It took me about an hour for it all to fall apart." "Is that all?" I felt disappointed. Winslow helped destroy our marriage, and they just gave him a stern reprimand? Carlia shrugged. "I also gave him a video recording of you and him together. Let him see himself in action. Let him listen to what he says about me. I think I almost convinced him that he was gay." I giggled. This time it sounded almost real. "That explains a lot about what happened to him." He is completely confused. It was as if I had turned into a ghost wandering around the office. The smoking area was empty. Apparently, the band was going to continue playing. "He deserves it." Charlie's face hardened. "I also gave Winslow another video." I felt pain in my stomach. "Not the last day?" He looked at me. "I promised that I would destroy it without even looking at it, and I kept my promises." I blushed, and the pain in my stomach rose up. It's not hard to guess what he means. After all, there is only one among us who did not keep her promises. Through the walls of the smoking area, I heard the sounds of drums. The group started. "So what was that second video?" "It's with me and someone else. And before you ask, I won't tell you with whom. Suffice to say, I'm sure it destroyed Winslow. It's not hard to guess who was paired with Charlie. Fucking Marty!" I felt my anger flare. Then she suppressed it. "What right do I have to be angry? I left my marriage and he moved on. To fucking Marty. Literally." I took a shuddering breath. She clenched her hands. He said he's not dating anyone, which means whatever he had with Marty is probably over. Hope. I heard bass through the wall. Drums. Big ones. Drums. But why didn't you punish me? I asked. After all, in reality, it was I who betrayed you. Charlie smiled. Yes, but when he took advantage of a bad situation, he gave me a sharp look. Besides, who said I didn't punish you? I rolled my eyes. Come on, Charlie. You could tear my life apart, get fired, destroy my relationship with my parents, sever all my friendships. Could have made me a leper. Instead, you gave my parents a simplified version of events, handed me a fair divorce decree, and, as far as I can tell, never said another word about it. He didn't answer for a long time. I listened to the drums and bass as the song wound down. How to punish someone you love, Ash. How do you decide what is fair? Balanced. He crossed his legs and looked at the wall for a second. It was that thoughtful face he made when he was trying to find the perfect words. How I missed this look. I watched the video. What happened on the 5th day? I saw how bad it was for you. But you still held on. I looked at my hands. They blurred. I thought I had to. My voice cracked. To balance. He smiled again, but this time the smile was empty. It didn't reach his eyes. You know, I still took a little revenge. I froze. You didn't watch the last day, did you? Damn it, Ashley, I made a promise. I blushed. I've never heard him be so angry. What then? What did you do? New song. I heard bass. Start. He looked at me, as if deciding whether to speak. Finally, he squared his shoulders. On that last day, I watched the video around 11 in the morning. Yes, and I called you at 6:30 p.m. I don't understand. The cameras were connected in such a way that when they were activated, I received a notification on my phone. On that last day, the notification came at 5:15. Understanding has come. So, on the last day, you could have stopped. Yes. I had about 6 hours to stop it. 6 hours of thinking about calling you and letting you off the hook. I thought about how far you would go to punish me. I thought about a worthy punishment. And you let me go through this. I felt my face turn red. Within 6 hours. To her. The song was in full swing. I could almost hear the words. The singer's Scottish accent could be heard through the wall. But why? How? You acted like you were crazy, Ashley. I couldn't punish you for being crazy. His eyes became hard again. They were so dark, so cold. But that doesn't mean I couldn't let you punish me. I shuddered. Charlie could have stopped all this with a phone call, but he didn't. I decided that I needed to be punished, and I couldn't stop myself from remembering. I felt out of place. I was angry. I was very angry. And to some extent, I was impressed. In the end, admiration prevailed over anger. Charlie's revenge was exactly what I would do. He allowed me to trap myself, punish myself, humiliate myself, and at the same time give him everything he needed to erase me from his life. It was cruel and brilliant, perfectly balanced and flawlessly executed. The singer shouted the words. Suddenly I recognized the song, Quiet Little Voices. I listened to it so many times with him. Little quiet voices creep into my head. I'm young again. I'm young again. I'm young again. I'm young again. Did I seduce my husband? Looking at his face, I saw the emotions hidden beneath the surface. He wasn't exactly proud of his actions, but he wasn't proud either. He didn't regret anything, and I realized that he shouldn't have. I played revenge. He played better. Little silent monsters creep into my head. I'll fall in love with you. I'll fall in love with you. I'll fall in love with you. I'll fall in love. I was wondering where we would go next. Will this be the last time I see him? Will we become friends? Friends with benefits? Will we get married again and get a white picket fence in the suburbs? Shall we become international assassins and begin to overthrow governments? I knew one thing. Whatever I did next, I wanted to do it with Charlie. I want to do all this with him. And, if I had something to say about this, he would understand that he also wants to do all this with me. But first, as I understand, we need to catch the concert. Luckily, Charlie had other ideas. "Take your coat," he growled at me. "We are leaving." I smiled. Maybe my story will have a happy ending after all. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.